Welcome to Asian Book Club, where we highlight Asian and Asian American authors. We are your hosts,
Jamae and Sabangan.
And I'm Stephen Park. And we are going to talk about something that came up in this book that I always thought was a little bit interesting between specifically Filipino and Korean cultures.
For sure.
And that's karaoke or karaoke.
Yes.
So, how are you familiar with karaoke?
I'm familiar with karaoke in many different aspects, but in Filipino culture, or at least Filipinx Filipino culture on Guam, we break out the karaoke system anytime there's a gathering. So whether it's for a birthday, a wedding, or a despedida, which is a goodbye, farewell, or a welcoming back home, we use either Magic Mic, which is just the microphone by itself with the numbers that you can input the song that you want to sing, or a full-blown karaoke system that looks like a jukebox with speakers loud enough to shake the whole neighborhood.
And that's not Magic Mike, the Channing Tatum.
No, not Channing Tatum. There's no stripping.
Sometimes there could be.
No, not in Filipino cultures. No, it is family friendly.
Yes.
In terms of like the outward appearance, but the songs, like thinking back to the songs that family members would sing while children were around, I'm like, oh my gosh, you're talking about
Well, so in Korean culture, it's a little bit different because I don't think we really do karaoke. Like, it's not planned for big events. Like, I feel like when I used to go to parties with Filipino families, it's like, you know there's going to be karaoke inside the house because the machine's there.
Right.
Almost most Filipino families that I know own some version of a karaoke machine.
Yes, and sometimes they have multiple karaoke machines.
The way that Korean people tend to do it is we go to norebangs, which are like karaoke rooms, and they're small rooms.
Yes, and they're private, right?
They're private. There's usually food, alcohol, stuff like that you can order, and they'll get delivered. It's super loud. It's kind of like when you go into those dystopian movies, and it's like you walk into one of those like gaming rooms, and there's just like nothing but sensory deprivation from all the noise.
Right.
Yeah, so that's what I grew up being extremely used to, was going to norebangs. Like, I was always a little bit embarrassed to kind of sing, I guess. But it was also because when we do karaoke, when we do norebang, there's two major different people.
Yes.
There are the ones that are singing songs so that you could bop. And then there are the ones that are singing songs because they're trying to make America's Next Idol and The Voice, and they're trying their best to belt it out.
Who's Got Talent?
Yes, and so that usually requires ballads and some Whitney Houston, and it's a different vibe when it gets to that point. I think there are really good song choices where you can belt it and still keep everyone involved.
Right.
But then when you're doing like depressing love songs and then that's like the last 30 minutes and you're trying to really show your magic,
right?
It's not my favorite part to be in a room stuck with that environment
right
at like midnight when you're falling asleep. But we're also planning, so one of our friends, her birthdays is coming up or actually it just passed, but
their celebration
is coming up, and she wants to go to an American karaoke. And that is when you go to a bar and there's a karaoke machine there, and there's a KJ, which is a karaoke jockey, I think.
Yeah. Someone who's playing the music and making sure it's queued up for the person that the music is playing for.
Right, and there's like a list of people, and they're coordinating that whole list. So, my question to you is, what is your private karaoke song, and what is your white people karaoke song?
Private karaoke song. I'm one of two minds when it comes to karaoke, and it depends on the room, who I'm with. When I'm with friends, truthfully, I love singing shots. Because it's very few words and you're not really singing. You're just yelling shot, 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 shots. When it's public, when I'm with my family, when I'm with like multiple relatives, it's more like I'm singing Tagalog songs.
Well, what if you're in a setting with strangers?
I'm probably gonna whip out some Britney Spears.
Okay.
Yeah, because I want to be able to dance and like not have the focus be on my voice, because I don't have an amazing singing voice. I am able to carry a tune, but I want my actual assets and skills to show, which is movement and dance.
I think for me, my American karaoke songs are Sweet Caroline, and I think one of the ones I want to try is I Want to Dance with Somebody with Whitney Houston.
Yes.
Because they don't really require like an amazing voice.
Right.
But the second part of that is everyone wants to sing in. Like you can't sing those songs and have other, like people aren't just quiet when they hear that song. Everyone wants to sing in, so it like hides me, which I prefer.
That's fair.
But when I do go with friends, when I do go to Norebang, the songs that I'm singing are like Boys to Men, like End of the Road. So I am that person that shows off my talent.
Wow.
And I try to really belt it out.
Totally.
Yeah. And it like really doesn't matter if you're good or not. It's like, how much can you belt?
Right, it's like how much feeling can you infuse into this music?
Yes, and I love how, I don't know, I noticed this with like Filipino aunties, where they're like so dependent on the score.
Yes.
They're like, this needs to be a 95
right.
or a 100.
Right.
And it's like,
it has to be 100. They're not gonna settle for 90s.
Yeah, and I just like, I don't know if the machine fully registers the notes.
No, I think it's registering the loudness
and
like the power.
Exactly, it's just like the enthusiasm of the whole situation.
Exactly.
So that's the secret, I'm pretty sure. We'll keep trying it out in upcoming settings to see if that really truly is the way to go.
I'm just gonna say that I've never participated in United States American kind of karaoke. I've only done Korean karaoke and Filipino karaoke. So this is gonna be new for me, and I'm a little scared.
There was one person that I remember seeing. It's gonna be at the same bar that we're going to. I've only gone there, I think, once, maybe twice at most. And I think the KJ, the karaoke jockey, was in on it, because somebody came up and they put in Beauty and the Beast.
Wow.
And so they did, I think it was a guy, and they did the Aladdin part. And then
Beauty and the Beast?
Or sorry, no, the Aladdin song.
Okay.
Whole New
Whole
World.
New World. Okay.
And the person that chose the song, I believe, if I remember correctly, he was a guy and sang the guy part, and the karaoke jockey sang Jasmine. And it was the most beautiful. Like, you could have put that on The Voice. Like, it was such a good rendition. But truly, I think it's just about trying to get a very drunk crowd in on it, and that's how you get away with it.
For sure. Maybe that's what I'll do. Maybe I'll sing Disney.
Yeah, Disney's always good. A little Frozen.
No, I cannot do. I cannot reach those notes.
Yeah, so I'm excited to go into that, and we'll talk about how karaoke kind of plays a little bit into Annie's life. But before we do that, let's go into our recommendation for the week.
So, in terms of feeling and in terms of movement, the recommendation for the week is Kim Saira, who is a healer and specifically uses somatic active healing for community care. And in essence, somatic is referring to the body and like being able to feel into your body. Kim Saira has been hosting many community care events via Zoom, where you're using your body and using affirmations and feeling all the things that you're feeling, like releasing blame and shame, while also inviting in excitement and enthusiasm for whatever it is that you want for your life. And at the end of these events, she does oracle card readings, tarot card readings based on that particular season's theme, whether it's, for example, Aries season or Taurus season. She's reading and pulling from those particular aspects. And currently, she has opened up another cohort for a program that she's called Authentically You, where it's an intimate setting for Asian American women and femmes to tune into their community, creativity, and somatic release, where they're able to check in with each other and have space held with other guest healers and wellness practitioners. To learn more about Kim Saira and the work that she does, you can find her on Instagram at Kim Saira, KIMSAIRA, or you can look at the link in her bio to see what other things that she's offering.
Yep, and that link is going to be stan.store/Kim Saira,
Yes.
which is STAN.STORE/KIMSAIRA.
Yes.
And that's our recommendation for the week. Okay, so this is our final piece to Happy Birthday or Whatever by Annie Choi.
Yes, and to recap, last time in the previous episode, we talked about essays that illuminated Annie's relationship with her mother. And this is going through different life stages, like her first menstruation, and then also getting revenge for her mom getting rid of her stuffed animals, and in turn getting rid of her mom's religious tchotchkes. Later, she helps her mom through her cancer treatment, and then the following essay, it lightens up by her figuring out what her relationship is to food through vegetarianism, and finally working together with her mom to find the approval, or to gain the approval, from the family matriarch, who is her paternal grandmother.
Yeah, and so the story continues as we enter through chapters 11 through 13.
Mm-hmm.
And we are going to go straight into it. So chapter 11 is Fool Who Play Cool.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, while in Korea, Annie is yanked out of bed to embark on a seemingly endless journey to a national park to visit a Buddhist temple with her mother and her mother's friends. Although the drive should only take 5 hours, the numerous pit stops and food breaks make for a lengthy adventure. Although the group ends up only spending 15 minutes at their intended destination, the road trip reveals a side of Annie's mom we have yet to see.
Mm-hmm. I do not like hiking, and what I appreciate is on page 163, Annie says Soroksan, which is the national park that they're going to, Soroksan is a mountain and a national park. I remember going when I was 5 and crying because my legs were tired. Even then, I knew hiking is the devil's work, and I felt like shouting amen right after reading that passage.
Mm-hmm. I love hiking. I think when I first started hiking, it was more about the destination, and it was very much a social media, Instagram-y kind of fulfilling thing to take a picture at the top of something.
Yeah.
But as I started getting more and more into it, it was much more about the journey of things, like the relaxation within it, the calmness, kind of getting out into nature. Nowadays, I think I'm a little bit more restricted on times, which is why it's harder for me to really figure out getting there. And especially knowing that you don't like it makes it harder for us to go.
Yeah. I figured out that I love walking, and I love walking over hiking. I hiked a lot on Guam, and Guam is sticky and humid and hot. But here in Portland, even though they call some walks in the park hiking, I just love to walk. And in Michelle Buteau's words, hiking is just fancy walking. And I would rather just, like, the same ways and the same reasons that you enjoy hiking is why I enjoy walking. It's the scenery, it's being in nature, it's being able to just enjoy the journey rather than the destination.
But I don't think you've had a chance to really see some of the peaks and the top points of Oregon.
That's fair.
Which I think is very unique to places like this.
Yeah.
But all that to say, what we find out is that she doesn't even have to hike once they get there.
Right, they use a cable car.
Which she also hates.
Yeah.
Maybe as much as hiking. She does the thing that I do, which is when I go up on things like that, I think of everything breaking down and me falling. So I'm constantly trying to figure out ways to survive, which is also what she does.
Yes.
But the thing is, before we even get to Soraksan, it's the journey that gets us there.
Right.
Which is, it starts with Annie, who, it sounds like it was the morning after they just flew into Korea.
Right, so she's still going through jet lag. She's also not a morning person.
Right, and she gets woken up at 4:30 or some...
4:15.
4:15.
Yes.
And it's her ungodly hour. She gets jabbed awake. And then the funny part was, as she's waking up and she's trying to figure all this stuff out, there's this little gleaming light of redemption that she's like, oh, maybe I'll get to spend time with my uncle who I really like.
Yeah.
And her uncle's like, I'm just taking you to your mom's friend's house.
Yeah.
And they're going to take you. Not to mention the bathroom scene, which is like, she's wearing her mom's sock.
Yes.
And then she steps into that like pool of water, which is what I was familiar with Korean bathrooms too. Was really gross. I hate wet socks. It's like my least favorite thing. So then, she meets up with her mom's friends, and I think this is where we get a side of Annie's mom that we truly haven't had a chance to see.
Right, because before this, the other essays, we see her mom as being a mom.
Right. And so she's much more controlling in a way. She just has to be the figure that is overseeing a lot of things.
Yeah.
But now we're seeing Annie's mom as an individual, a person, her amongst her friends, her joking around and having fun.
Yes. And being lively and cordial.
Right. And it was funny that it was almost flipped, where Annie seemed to always be the younger, the lighter, the funnier one. And in this story, Annie becomes the grumpy one, almost like what it seems that she portrays of her mother through a lot of these stories.
Right.
And I love that one of the things that her mom and the friends specifically plan out for are those road trip stops.
Yes.
Have you... Because I know you've been to Korea twice?
Yes, I've been to Korea twice, but I've never gone on road trips in Korea. I've only seen road trips through K-dramas.
Right, and I think that's most people. I think most people's experiences when they go to Korea that I know are they go either for work or they're staying downtown, so they stay in like Dongdaemun or Myeongdo or some part of Seoul. But the part that people don't get to see are these road trips. And so I honestly don't even remember these moments, but when I was reading through the book, I specifically remember our family, like my mom's side of the family primarily, where we would go on these road trips, and I think all I did was fall asleep, and then I'll get shaken awake, and I'm at this road stop, and these road stops have rows of food. It's like AM, PM, just style, like windows of really delicious foods.
Nice.
And so imagine just jumping in a car, and then you fall asleep, you wake up, and it's just like, hey, here's food. I'm like, oh, this is the dream.
Yes. I mean, while I was reading this and when I watched it on K-dramas, I'm like, if this were what road trips were like in the States, I think I would be more game to do it.
On the other hand, like, the time I had to drive from Portland to Houston, I ended up doing a one-shot, like, 30-something hour drive, which is not great and not recommended.
No.
I was hallucinating by the end of it. But it just wasn't the same, right? And I think it's Annie's mom's friend, the guy,
the
ajashi, who mentions that, like, no, I think it was the ajumma who says, like, Korea's so small, so maybe these red stops are in there to make it feel larger. I was like, that's a really good point. It's also probably healthier to get out every hour.
Absolutely. And, like, be able to eat or use the bathroom and just, like, fulfill your needs each hour.
So, yeah, I thought it was really fun being able to see her mom joke around with her friends. It seemed like her mom was the kid dragging the parent along and be like, hey, let's go grab this, let's go grab this.
Right.
And I thought that was really fun. And a really beautiful side to see, especially coming off of this last essay where we saw them working together.
Yes.
And the fact that Annie starts this essay off so abruptly of like her mom jabbing her and be like, hey, wake up, wake up, wake up. I thought it was really cool to see this story placed the way that it was.
Definitely.
But then we move on to chapter 12, which is rules of engagement.
In this essay, we see that finding a partner to spend your life with is hard enough, but trying to do it in this Korean family reveals an additional level of difficulty. We see how gaining approval for a significant other entails specific requirements like being Korean, being a Harvard graduate, and being either a doctor or lawyer. The agreed upon rule then among the cousins is to avoid bringing anyone home until you're ready to marry them.
Yes. Now, something just happened to me recently where I was talking to someone and she's white. She's American, and she is dating someone that is Lebanese. So, Lebanese, I think, the way that she explained how her scenarios went had a very similar feel to the experience of not only this story, but kind of our story. And it's this ultimate grilling, this feeling of inferiority almost that parents can give you as you are the one that's, I mean, for lack of a better term, interrogated in this first meeting.
Totally. And to make that connection, I was grilled by your parents when I first met them, and every time I meet them, I'm grilled by them. And I'm wondering, is this only for parents of sons, or is this parents of daughters as well?
I think it's for both, because I think the ultimate hope of the parent is that they want someone to take care of their kids. So even when I talk to your grandmother, like your nanai, she says the same thing to me before we leave every conversation, which is like, make sure you love Jamae, or make sure you take care of Jamae, right?
Right.
So I think that is the ultimate hope, but the way that it is portrayed and the way that it is outwardly shown is in this very protective manner.
For sure. I mean, I ask because all I know is your parents who both have sons. And then when you talked about this person you know, the parents who were grilling the person you know were parents of the son.
Yeah. So I don't know because I'm not really sure of the other instances. But I do know that at least my parents are very protective. But what I can say, and what I do think, is that if it wasn't for their interest or their thought that this would be something more permanent, I don't think my parents, nor would I think the parents of, I think it was like Andy or something, or Claire.
Yes, Andy.
Andy. Like, I don't think that they would care. Like, I don't think that same line of questioning would happen. So I do think it comes from a point of maybe concern, but also for caring. I know I've been in instances where I've met other people's parents, or like when you have met other people's parents who are just friends and like only being seen as friends. Like you get a couple of questions like, oh, are you going to school? Are you doing this? And it just like kind of fades off pretty quickly, right?
For the most part.
For the most part. I have been in scenarios where I've been in a relationship with someone and I've gotten that same feel, and it almost feels worse because it's like, well, then why don't you care about the fact that I'm here? Like, don't you have questions for me? And I don't know if that comes from my background of knowing how my parents do things, but it just feels very neglected.
Or it feels like you're not as important as you should be. Totally. Like we mentioned, there are two different scenarios in this particular essay. There's one cousin who only brought her significant other when they were engaged. And this significant other checked all the boxes. They were Korean. They graduated from the Yale of Korea, which is not particularly bad, but it's acceptable.
Yeah, I think it was Yonsei.
And then
They're also Catholic.
They were Catholic and they were a lawyer. So they checked many boxes, and if they didn't check the box, it was an acceptable box to not check. And so they did it the right way, quote unquote. And then there was another cousin that brought 2 different girlfriends at 2 different celebrations, and both times he ended up breaking up with them.
Mm-hmm.
And this caused a ruckus among the family, not only with Annie's mother, who was complaining and being like, no, you just bring the one.
Mother and father, they both agreed.
Right, true.
Yeah.
But the mother brought it up first.
Right.
And later, Annie kind of explores with her other cousins and was like talking to Annie and being like, why did you do that? Why did you cause this chaos?
Mm-hmm.
And it was initiated by his mother saying, I want to get to know you more. But when he started bringing over these significant others to these dinners, then she's like, oh, stop doing that, just bring the one.
Mm-hmm. Which kind of goes into the other point that was briefly mentioned, and it's the fact that our parents, and I think a lot of people's parents, all the way until you finish your education, it's don't date, don't go into relationships, don't do anything, because your entire focus should be on studying and getting good grades and getting to that career.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden, you hit graduation date. And like, as soon as you get that sash, as soon as you turn over the tassel, that's when it's like, oh, where's my grandchild? Where's my apple? Where's my, like, it's like, what happened? Like, how am I supposed to do this?
Exactly. It's like, I didn't get any practice, nor did I get any advice on how to navigate this.
Also, it takes at least 9 months. Like, give me like a year at least minimum. But yeah, it's really funny how that stuff changes over so quickly and so unexpectedly.
Yes.
I also feel that there was a scene in here, I think it was the very start of it, where Annie and her father are talking, and it shows a relationship that we have yet to see throughout this whole book, which is Annie talking with her father.
For a long period of time. Because before, we've seen Annie talk to her father over the phone, and it's very brief.
It was for the birthday, and then for her mom's cancer, but that was pretty much it.
Right.
This was the first almost heart-to-heart conversation that they had. But that reminded me of the conversations that I have with my dad. And it was really funny because Annie mentions that while she's trapped in by her dad in this conversation, she looks outside and there's traffic. And she's like, there's nowhere to go.
Right.
That's always how I feel. Like, just like the bathroom thing that we talked about last time.
Yeah.
I feel like he plans it out so well. Like, it's like an evil mastermind to be like, you have nowhere to go, you have nowhere to run. And it's... yeah, on the freeway, like, okay, so most people have the sex talk with their parents, like, 13, maybe? I don't know. It depends on who you are, what your background is, things like that, right? So I had a sex talk on my way to college as I was 18 or something, whenever you go to college, right? So I had that. Then I finished college. I take 2 years to finish Rex. And then I go to grad school, and I forget what age I am, but finish college plus 2 years. And then on my way, I'm getting driven to the airport, and on the way, my dad's in the driver's side, my mom's in the passenger seat, and I'm in the back. And that's when I get my second sex talk. I'm like, what is the point of this? And my dad says, like, you know, I wish we could do this without your mom around, because this is a very private, like, boys' time conversation. I'm like, what is happening? Like, thank goodness for the internet, because if I didn't have the internet in my hands on my phone, I don't know how I could have mentally escaped that scenario. Because at least while he was talking, I can't even remember what I was doing, but I must have been on Instagram or playing games. I must have been on something, because I had to dissociate from the moment that my dad is giving me the second talk with my mom in the passenger seat. Yeah, it was interesting. Anyways, her moment of feeling trapped, I understand being on a freeway at 65, actually it's LA, more like 80 miles per hour, not being able to escape, having the second sex talk. Real interesting. But now I know all the ins and outs, apparently. I'm good.
Wow.
Yes. So that kind of, I don't know, I thought this essay was really good for showing that side of things, and for people that I think are in this realm, and obviously this doesn't span the category of all Asians, and I'm sure there are other non-Asian families that have to go through the same thing, like this grilling kind of mentality, just because parents are very protective of their children.
Right.
But coming from where I am, I thought this was a really clear glimpse into what that conversation can look like. And for those that may not know this, it's at least a window into what that might feel like. But truly, and you can probably vouch for this more than I can, the feel of getting that kind of grilling where you're already on edge and nervous about meeting someone, it's really hard to kind of deal with and come out on the other end.
Right. It feels like at least in my experience, it feels like I need to come up with the right answers. And if I don't have the right answers, I need to have the right explanation for not having the right answers. So, and like on top of that, as a person who needs to ruminate and think things through before I say anything, it's even harder for me to come up with something to say in the moment. So I appreciate that you are there to make that buffer. And what's interesting is that while I was reading this, I felt like this, although in Filipino culture, we have these conversations. Every time we go to a family gathering, everyone has to ask, do you have a boyfriend? Do you have a girlfriend yet? And once you do, when are you getting married? Even if that relationship might not be serious for the person, it's always, when are you getting married? When are you having kids? And sometimes it's not even when are you getting married. Sometimes it goes straight into when are you having kids, just because of the culture on Guam and knowing that it's possible to just have kids without marriage.
And quick side note before we go into our last essay. This story has a scene where they talk about her cousin Andy, who is a physical therapist, who brings home his girlfriend, who is Filipina.
Yes.
And then pretty much she goes, and it didn't work out. And I was like, all right, I'm done with this book. And I closed it. I'm just kidding. But I did get to that last essay, and that last essay is called New Year's Games. And in this final essay, Annie is coerced home to celebrate New Year's with the Choi clan. Although she is promised that everyone will be there, everyone does not include her brother and several of her cousins. Annie begrudgingly attends this gathering, moping and leaning into sarcasm throughout the evening. However, in the end, they share laughter and love that comes from the chaos of their family dynamic. What did you think about this last essay?
It reminded me of my family gatherings in that it's everyone, it's chaotic, it's loud. And in this essay, Annie really needs coffee. And she doesn't like any of the coffee in the house because it's instant and it's very flavored. Those are the only two options that she's got because that's what her parents enjoy. So when she gets to the actual gathering, which is like at dinner time, once she's able to get the coffee, she pours herself a cup, drinks it, puts it down, and then it disappears. And so every time she gets up to get herself a cup of coffee, once she puts it down and turns her attention to something else, it disappears. And that's how I feel like in gatherings. If I'm not holding on to my drink, it's gonna disappear and I'm gonna be upset. So I totally related to that aspect of her story.
And for me, our extended family is still in Korea. So I grew up with my immediate family here. So it was my parents, my grandmother, and then me and my brother. Because we didn't have a large family here, my parents eventually found a group of other Korean people, and that was, I forget what they called it, but that was our group. Like those were, and I think I mentioned this in a past episode, like those were the kids that I grew up with, and we went to a bunch of gatherings together. So that's what this reminded me of, is those events and having my brother there, that we can go off and do stupid things and like make stupid jokes and have our whole side conversations. I also think those little side conversations between her and her cousin, the really nice one that's there, I think those are a part of the big party. Like we go from this macro version of her dad telling this weirdly really weird riddle to her talking to her cousin and like going into that view.
Yeah.
And I thought it was such a good way to see this whole environment.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that really stood out to me was the game.
Mm-hmm.
So we always called it yutnori, which just means like play that game.
Right.
And it's really fun. I mean, it's crazy, it's hectic, and it really does get that lively.
Mm-hmm.
I think her mom being that competitive is all I remember from these games, is like everyone gets so hyped. And it's not about the money. It's not about the $15 prize. It's just about the fun of trying to win it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was such a nice picture to kind of see.
Totally. Yeah, I feel like just going through the essay, it helped me. It brought a sense of home back to me, because it reminded me of like what it feels like to be in these big gatherings. And like you said, there are the side conversations you have with your siblings, and then there are the side conversations you have with the cousins who you talk to. And because Annie doesn't have her brother, I'm thinking about family gatherings, and if I didn't have either of my siblings, I too would feel kind of betrayed.
Yeah, I don't know how I would get through these events without having that bond with someone else. And you just don't have that with your parents, because that's their bonding time.
Right.
And you could see how like all the dads are hanging out and all the moms are kind of having their whole thing of like cutting up the fruit and doing all these things, which is like a very classic Korean way of gathering. Also, like little parts in this story were so funny, and I think it brought everything just back together. Like it kind of rounded off the whole book. My favorite part, I hesitate to say favorite, but my favorite part was her dad, and like it's the beginning of the essay, and her dad coming out into the kitchen and he's not wearing pants.
Oh no.
Which was like, in itself, she was like, Dad, you need to put on pants. And then I think he goes to get her coffee, like his coffee.
Right.
And then it shows that she calls it like a natural ventilation.
Yes.
Where his butt is. I was like, man. I like at first I was like, how does she remember things like that? And I guess like the trauma, it's like, how do you not remember things like that?
It's like it gets stuck in your mind.
Yeah. So going from this essay, I think it's a good transition into like, what did you think about this book?
I really enjoyed this book. Even though this was a reread, it felt like I was experiencing it for the first time all over again. Although there were bits and pieces, like really small details, like her vegetarianism, like her and her brother's relationship. Those were little details I remembered, but the actual stories felt very new to me. And it was refreshing to see this overall arc of the way her and her mom seemed rocky, and then they showed how that they're actually very close, and then seeing, like we said in this episode, seeing her relationship with her father as well as her relatives. It was refreshing to see how open and honest she was, while being funny in including these small details.
And it's funny that you say open and honest, because for me, a lot of this related to experiences that I grew up with, and I don't carry a ton of Korean friends, so I don't have a large friend group that I bounce these experiences off of. But when you say she was open and honest, it more makes me think of if my inner child had a voice and it could retell my whole experience of growing up, that's what Annie's voice sounded like to me. It was like that fighting back piece of like, even with the dolls or the stuffed animals, it was like fighting back in those little instances, or you could see the fear and like the immobilization of when she heard her mom had cancer. You could see the edginess and the rawness to her not wanting to go on this road trip with her family. And I felt like the way she wrote captured a lot of my mood. And then also the way that she wrote had such humor and such cuttingness to a lot of her stories that from the beginning I was like, oh, this is really good. And it just kind of kept me up there throughout the whole read.
Nice. At the end of this book, do you still think that it's your favorite read so far?
Yes. I think the lighthearted nature and just how much it resonated with me just makes it so that it's really hard for me not to feel strong feelings with this book.
Definitely.
But with that, we are now going to go into our hints into our next book, which may not be as lighthearted from what I know. So to give you a little understanding of what we're going to go through, we're going to guide you through our hint of jam. So we are going to talk about our 3 hints for our next book and our next read. So hint number 1, it was a National Book Award finalist and New York Times Book Review Top 10 of the Year. Hint number 2, the title refers to a mechanical game originating in Japan used for gambling. And hint number 3, this has recently been adapted into a limited series on Apple TV. So, if you want to join us on our read, if you have any suggestions for future books, if you want to tell us how much you enjoyed Happy Birthday or whatever, how can people reach out to us?
You can reach out to us through email at asianbookclubpod, P-O-D, @gmail.com, or you can write in the comments on Instagram at asianbookclubpod, P-O-D.
Yep, and we have our website, which is asianbookclubpod.com, which also has our bookstore where you can look up any of the books that we're reading or other ones that we suggest and recommend.
Yeah. And
don't forget to subscribe and like, but until next time, I hope you remember to treat yourself.
Nice.
Bye.
Bye.